So there's a statement I've come across recently in which it said something like this, that Charlie Kirk wasn't a hate preacher, but rather a preacher of truth. It just happens to be the truth you hate. So I wanted to look at some of the statements and points that Charlie Kirk has mentioned and provide certain responses to his so-called debates and arguments that he's given, responding to various questions that he's been asked. So this is what I'm going to do. And part of the reason why I'm doing this also is because, you know, the last couple of videos where I've had to research Charlie Kirk, I've been coming across all these videos with all the stuff that he's saying, and it's complete and utter nonsense. So, you know, it's quite frustrating when you have to trawl through his videos and looking at these arguments. And I really want to expose him and really expose the type of people that I really think this guy's an intellectual. This guy's a truth speaker. This guy's one of the greatest academics and spiritual leaders of the Western and American world. So anyway, let's just take a look at some of his clips and then I'll respond, inshallah.
So what Israel's doing isn't bad. Killing children isn't bad, is what you're saying?
Hold on a second, but you have to go instance by...
Is it or not?
Are,
I need a yes
are
or
they
no.
intentionally killing kids? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
No, they are not.
So why,
that is complete
why are there so
BS.
many dead kids? Why are you okay with dead babies?
Good question. Why are there dead kids? Because Hamas has no
war
care.
crimes
Time out.
Israel.
So you think Israel? Let me get this straight. Let's think how irrational it is. Israel sits around.
Are you okay with dead
Let me hold on.
babies?
I want to make sure this is okay.
No, I need
Of
a
course,
yes
I'm not
or no
okay with dead kids.
Okay,
Okay, ridiculous.
so
I'm
why
the
you
most pro-life
agree with
person. I've
Israel?
debated
What
for
is
2
doing?
hours. Time out. Stop interrupting me. Do you think Israel? Do you think Israel sits around? And they say, "We're gonna. How do we kill more kids in Gaza today?"
I mean, so why are they killing kids then?
Exactly. Let's think. Maybe it's because Hamas uses the kids as human shields on top of their military bases.
So we watched his video. It's a really quick point before I respond to that particular, you know, claim that he made. Yeah, it's just a complete joke. But it's quite noticeable that these guys like Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, they go to these student campuses to speak to teenagers, try to say, look, we've just won a debate against this student, this kid, you know, and therefore he's somehow seen as an intellectual. Why don't they actually speak with real experts, people maybe like Norman Finkelstein, for example? Why don't they speak to these people who have researched, who understand the subject matter correctly, or at least have done the research in this subject area, and see if they can debate and win an argument with them? They'll never do that. And the reason why they'll never do that is because they know that their arguments are vacuous and shallow. And really all they have is, you know, this sort of charisma, this sort of ability to sound smart without actually saying anything smart. Anyways, he claims that Israel doesn't target children. And to be quite frank, that's contradicted by numerous reports, including those in Western news agencies like the New York Times or The Guardian and many other media outlets, as well as the fact that doctors in Gaza and even foreign doctors who have traveled to Gaza to help treat the wounded in the hospitals in Gaza, all of them have confirmed that actually they witnessed sniper targets against children under 5, in fact. We have even X-ray images that documents the number of children with bullets lodged in their head and neck. Al Jazeera itself quotes a report done by a Dutch daily newspaper in which they had collected testimonial evidence from foreign doctors, so they can't say, well, they're biased because of Palestinians that are reporting this, but from foreign doctors who went there to help treat Palestinians in Gaza, and they found that 15 out of the 17 doctors that they interviewed describe encountering children under 15 with single bullet wounds to the head or chest. Together, they identified 114 such cases during their missions in Gaza. Many of the children died, while others survived with devastating injuries. So yeah, they definitely targeted children. This is documented fact. And it's not surprising when you have government ministers in Israel suggesting that they should nuke the entire Gaza Strip, or also stating that there's no such thing as uninvolved civilians. Or when you have Yoav Gallant, the Minister of Defense, who stated, "We will end things inside Gaza. I have removed all restraints. You're allowed to attack everything." And also the fact that you have a UN tasked body to investigate genocide that have now concluded that Israel is committing a genocide. In fact, it's fulfilling 4 out of the 5 definitions of what constitutes genocide. It's pretty clear, the evidence from doctors, foreign doctors, evidence from X-ray images, evidence from the way Israeli governments have lifted all restrictions. I could go on and on listing evidence, even from Zionist soldiers themselves, that state that children are being targeted.
Are you in the IDF?
Yes.
Do you plan on killing kids in the future, Palestinian kids?
I want to bomb Gaza. I don't care about the kids. I don't care about the civilians. I don't care about them.
So you'll bomb them? You'll bomb the civilians? And
Yes, I will bomb Gaza. I will destroy Gaza.
Wow. There are 1 million kids in Gaza. You want them to die?
I want all Gaza die.
You want half of Gaza are children. You want them to die?
I want to bomb Gaza. I want to make it a mall.
Are you joking, or is this how you actually feel?
No, I'm dead serious.
And I am confronted many times by young Christians that believe that Israel is an oppressive apartheid state that basically should not exist in its current form. And so I am here to clearly communicate to you that we have to do a much better job of communicating, of conveying, I should say, the geopolitical significance of the state of Israel. The world's a better place because of the state of Israel. We have all 3 monotheistic religions represented in the Israeli Knesset and the Israeli Supreme Court. Israel actually expresses freedom of religion. I'll never forget when I was driving down to Hebron last year, and you're driving down south from Jerusalem, and there's this sign, and I don't speak Arabic, nor do I speak Hebrew. So I turned to my driver. I said, "What does that sign say?" There was no English translation, and there was a arrow in the middle, and an arrow to the right, arrow to the left, and the arrows to the right and left were red, and the arrow in the middle was black or some other, not a warning color. And so I said, "What does that mean?" They said, "Well, if we turn right, you'll die." What do you mean you'll die? Well, if you turn right, you go into the Palestinian Authority-controlled territories, and as a Christian, a Westerner, or a Jew, they'll kill you. It's like, well, what kind of ridiculous double standard here? If Arabs come into the Israeli-occupied areas, they're given benefits and rights to vote. You go into the Palestinian Authority-controlled areas, you get your head cut off.
So he makes a few points there, and I just want to break down 1 or 2 key points. Firstly, unlike him, I've actually visited Al-Khalil, also known as Hebron by the Jews, been to Muslim Arab areas in Al-Khalil, and this guy, I can tell you, is speaking absolute nonsense. But it's not surprising that when he went on his propaganda tour and simply accepted the complete nonsense that came out from his Zionist handlers who were touring him around Israel to say how great Israel, they claimed that there was a sign in Hebron or Al-Khalil that said, "You'll be beheaded, don't go there." That's just dumb. Just shows how unquestioning he was. Honestly, this is like willful ignorance and tempting to demonize Muslims and Palestinians, trying to claim that Westerners will be beheaded by Palestinians if you go into Palestinian Authority areas. It's just absolute nonsense. It's honestly nonsense. We have, you've just got on YouTube, you have Westerners who have been to Al-Khalil. Lots of non-Muslims have traveled to this area.
I went to Hebron. Man, that place shocked me to my core.
Wow.
I got to a vantage point. I could see over the wall. I could see the rubble of old Arab houses, town blocks that had been destroyed. And I could see like a city, 150,000 people, just next to like 500 settlers that were surrounded by military, surrounded by massive machine guns. And then I walk out onto the street, and there's these little 5-year-olds run up to me with no shoes on, offer me food straight away. First thing that happens, like these kids with no shoes, they're obviously not got a lot of money. And the first thing they think to do to me, a Westerner walking out of an occupied area, first thing that happens is I get offered food. And that's got to say something. So I think the kindness of the Palestinians, more than any other people I met, showed me truly what Islam was.
But the reason why the Zionist handlers didn't want Charlie Kirk to go to the Muslim areas or the Palestinian areas of Al-Khalil, of Hebron, is because he would be able to witness the apartheid for himself. He would be able to witness the oppression they face on a daily basis. And that's the thing, particularly about the right in America. They are willing to bury their heads in the sand to take Zionist money and then repeat everything that the Zionists claim. When I visited Masjid Ibrahimi in Al-Khalil, what the Zionists call Hebron, just to get into that masjid from the Muslim side, you had to be caged in, searched, metal detectors, locked doors in order to pass through to the next section. It took over 20 minutes for all of these checks just to enter the mosque. They know what they're doing. They want to make life difficult. They want to make it difficult for Muslims just to enter the masjid so they can slowly take more and more of that mosque and make it into a Jewish temple. Make Muslims abandon that masjid because it's because it's just so difficult to get in there. While Arabs in what they call Israel may have more rights, they are still discriminated against, unable to live in communities of their own choosing, unable to even bring in spouses from outside of Israel so as to restrict Palestinian Arab numbers in Israel, because Israel knows that if they have a minority and it's a sufficiently small minority, they can claim the right to have this ethno-supremacist state, that Jewish state for the Jews. They know that as soon as the demographics begin to change within Israel and there's more Arabs and more Palestinians living in that land, then their legitimacy as an ethno-supremacist state comes under question. That's why they want to keep it low. And similarly, Palestinians in Israel, or what they call Israel, they're not given the right to express their own speech. Like, for example, they're not allowed to commemorate Al-Nakba. But the situation gets even more worse for those who are living in the West Bank and Gaza. They're subject to military courts. Their movements are severely restricted, including in Hebron or Al-Khalil. There are walls of separation. Shuhada Street, you're not allowed to enter it. This is what they do. It's crazy. They restrict the movement. You have to get permission to just travel from one area of the West Bank to another area of the West Bank. There are Palestinians who have never even visited Masjid al-Aqsa because they can't get permission. As the organization Human Rights Watch stated, in a historic ruling, the International Court of Justice has found multiple and serious international law violations by Israel towards Palestinians in the occupied territory or the occupied Palestinian territory, including for the first time finding Israel responsible for an apartheid. So his claim that there's no apartheid, that's just absolute nonsense. It's contradicted by anybody who goes and visits Palestine today. You could see it for yourself. It's so clear. But when you're going on a propaganda tour, being shown certain areas, being fed certain information, being given copious amounts of money, then obviously there's an incentive to turn away. There's an incentive to turn the blind eye to what's bleedingly obvious for anybody who is independent or even semi-independent to see what's occurring within the West Bank, what's occurring within the Palestinian territories.
So was October 7th a genocide?
It wasn't a genocide, no.
By your own definition.
Yeah, let me tell you why. Because the ICJ now is investigating Israel. They're not investigating Hamas for genocide, if you know that.
Who?
The ICJ?
Yeah, the ICJ is anti-Israel, has been for a while.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure they are. Why do you say that?
Well, because they're funded largely by Arab
They're funded by who? Funded by who? Hamas?
Well, like by Qatar and Saudi Arabia and by very wealthy Gulf dictatorships. But I just...
This really takes the mick, yeah. The questioner makes the point that the ICJ are investigating Israel over genocide and not Hamas. His response, anti-Semitism. They're all anti-Semites. The ICJ's anti-Semites. And then he really shows how really ignorant he is by claiming that the ICJ is funded by Qatar or Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Can't trust them because Qatar funds them, so they are biased against Israel because all Muslims and Arabs are anti-Semites. This is the guy we are told was a great intellectual, and yet he doesn't know basic facts. I get it, that maybe the average person doesn't know what the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, is. But come on, you're meant to be this great intellectual and political thinker and debater. So let me just explain for those of his followers. The ICJ is the highest judicial body of the United Nations. They aren't a court sponsored by or paid for by Arabs. All nations who are members of the UN, including supposedly Israel, have accepted the ICJ has the right to issue judicial verdicts between nations. The body itself is made up of 15 independent judges who are voted on by the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council. The ICJ has always had judges representing the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. That means Britain, France and America are represented on this board, on this body, this judicial body. The initial ruling, therefore, the plausible genocide, was issued by the ICJ at a time, by the way, when the court was headed by an American judge. Honestly, I shouldn't have to explain this. This is exactly what he does. He's cheered on as though he's some great intellectual by those completely ignorant of basic facts. You know, this saying comes to mind, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And this is no better exemplified by the likes of Kirk and his followers. So no, it's not a court funded by Qatar or Saudi Arabia. It's funded by the UN, has permanent members of the Security Council represented as judges, and the ICJ's initial ruling was issued at a time that the head of the ICJ was an American. I'm not saying that the United Nations and the ICJ are a perfect body. No, they are flawed, structurally flawed, but for other reasons, primarily because it favors the Security Council and in particular permanent members of the Security Council, including Britain, France and America. This is part of the problem. So when a body that is actually biased towards the Security Council, the permanent members of the Security Council, issues a verdict of a plausible genocide, you know it must be bad. But no, hey, they're all anti-Semites, aren't they?
Let's say Hamas was like eradicated. What do you think should happen between both the communities in order to bring, I guess, peace between both of them and make things better?
Yeah, so just so everyone's clear, the reason why Gaza's under Hamas control is that there was a peace deal that was signed. Israel got out of Gaza in the pursuit of peace. Israel gave up the Sinai in pursuit of peace. Israel gave up portions of the West Bank in pursuit of peace. Israel has actually decreased the land size of their nation significantly in the last 40 years. Like almost, they have shrunk their country by nearly 75% since 1975. Most people, they don't teach you this in college. You can look it up. And in the pursuit of peace. And yet we've had more conflict, more strife. Number one, for the people in Gaza, Egypt has to step up. But they don't want them because they know that it's not exactly easy. Jordan has to step up. They don't want them either. So Arab partners don't want these people. And so they have to be forced to take them and assimilate them. And they're not going to. So it's not an easy solution.
Oh my gosh. What? Israel has shrunk its country by 75%. All because they want peace and justice within the region. They were so kind that they withdrew and they said, no, we'll give you this country. We'll shrink our own country in order for there to be peace. This is like pure gaslighting. Israel invades and occupies the Golan, invades and occupies the Sinai, invades and occupies Gaza and the West Bank. Israel invades and occupies Lebanon. And when they withdraw from the illegal occupation, they're shrinking their country. They're doing it for peace. You violently invade and illegally occupy another territory doesn't make that your country. Withdrawing from it doesn't mean you've just, given up part of your land. Just like when America withdrew its occupation from Afghanistan, doesn't mean America shrunk. But I suppose according to Kirk's logic, it does apparently. You can't claim you violently invade other countries, illegally occupy other countries, and then withdraw because, and the reality was the reason why Israel withdrew from the Sinai, it withdrew from Lebanon, was because it was unsustainable in the long term for Israel. They couldn't financially and militarily sustain its occupation. So they withdrew for strategic reasons, not because they wanted peace amongst its neighbors. That's why we see today Israel bombing, 6 or 7 different Muslim countries, from Tunisia to Qatar to Iran to Yemen to Lebanon to Syria. They're not doing that. They've invaded further into southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River. They still have troops there. They've invaded further into Syria and keep violating the sovereignty. They violated recently the sovereignty of Qatar. It doesn't sound like a land that wants peace. Sounds like a land that believes in this concept of Greater Israel. And we know this is what they believe. Israel, particularly the right in Israel, or the so-called extremist right, but I think it's prevalent amongst the Zionists. They want to create a Greater Israel. Some for religious reasons and others for strategic reasons, to create this military or the strategic depth for Israel. So no, they didn't withdraw because of, peace. They withdrew for strategic and military reasons. And even today, they still maintain occupation over Syria, in the Golan, Lebanon, and Sheba Farms, as well as the territories that they, control since 1967 of West Bank and Gaza. It's just utter nonsense. And also this point, and I want to address this something because he repeats this a few times in a few of his clips, that Israel withdrew from Gaza.
So just so everyone's clear, the reason why Gaza's under Hamas control is that there was a peace deal that was signed. Israel got out of Gaza in the pursuit of peace.
Again, this is nonsense. And if you're getting agitated, imagine what I'm feeling having to trawl through his stuff. Gaza was never independent. Israel never withdrew its occupation. Even David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister, said that Gaza was an open-air prison. Israel continued its occupation. It controlled the airspace, land borders, sea borders, with Palestinian movement having to get permission from Israel, special permission, to leave Gaza, even just to enter West Bank. and then to seek Israel's permission to re-enter Gaza. Any building or infrastructural development within Gaza, they had to get permission from Israel. Food, water, medicine, controlled by Israel. They even controlled everything from electricity and fuel as well. Even the internet is controlled by Israel. That's the textbook definition of occupation. Gaza wasn't given freedom. They were given a large concentration camp guarded by Zionist forces who every so often would mow the lawn, violate the ceasefire and murder more Palestinians. The airport in Gaza, which was destroyed by Israel, was then prevented by Israel for the Palestinians to rebuild it. Do I need to go on? It's clear. Even the United Nations, European Union, African Union, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, International Committee of the Red Cross, international legal experts, and a host of other legal bodies all concluded that was still an occupation of Gaza after its so-called 2005 withdrawal from Gaza. And again, they didn't do it for peace. Israel did it because it was too difficult for them to maintain security for their settler colonialist program in Gaza at that time. And they used this as an opportunity to expand efforts to occupy the West Bank and to take the whole of Jerusalem. This is what Ariel Sharon said. He said it was a strategic decision to consolidate its gains within the West Bank. This is what they wanted, and therefore take Jerusalem, the whole of it.
I mean, so why are they killing kids then?
Exactly. Let's think. Maybe it's because Hamas uses the kids as human shields on top of their military bases.
So he claims that the reason why there's so many civilian deaths is because Hamas uses its own population as human shields. Just logically, that makes absolute no sense. If a person takes a school full of children as hostages, then it doesn't justify him blowing up the school to kill the hostages. It's just basic common sense. And I've already addressed the point that Israel does in fact deliberately target children. We've got X-ray images to demonstrate this. They've also been found by the United Nations body that they are committing a genocide, which by definition means killing civilians, trying to destroy the population. Well, guess who does use human shields? Yes, Israel does. They tie bodies to their vehicles to escape being attacked. We've got video images of what occurred. And why do they do that? Because they actually know Palestinians won't attack Zionists if it means killing their own Palestinian brothers and sisters. We've also got pictures like this of children tied to military vehicles by the Zionists to hide behind. You know, every accusation is an admission. Even the Israeli courts ruled that Israeli soldiers use Palestinians as human shields. To then claim that, well, Hamas embeds themselves into civilian areas, that's like saying that Israel itself, its military, embeds itself in civilian areas. And like when Iran targeted the Israeli intelligence building, Mossad, in Tel Aviv, well, you know, this military building was being embedded within, you know, civilian areas. It's just pure nonsense. All of this is just pure Zionist talking points. It's just simply stating a point without any facts, any evidence in order to justify the murder and the slaughter of civilians. It's there to make Americans who support Israel feel good about themselves. Think, well, you know, we're in the moral right. It's not our fault that all these civilians die. No, it is. You're shooting them, you're bombing them, you're killing them, you're genociding them, and you're supporting that by your wealth and your taxes. You're supporting that by your words, by your moral justification or attempts to morally justify what they're doing. But if you dig deeper, even beyond the superficial, shallow arguments that they make, then you know that all this is false. Hospitals, schools, universities, residential homes, mosques, and even churches have been destroyed by Israel. And all they have to say to confuse the naive or to convince the naive is there's a Hamas tunnel hiding there. Honestly, wake up.
I was going to ask you, you think that Israel should displace the Palestinians from Palestine to Egypt and Jordan?
It's a tough question. It's a difficult question. I don't know what the solution is. I don't.
So you think it's right for them to ethnically
I'm not saying it's
cleanse
right.
them?
I'm saying the solution is very difficult because the people of Gaza have shown that they are incapable of self-government.
Sure.
Incapable. That when they are given self-government, it becomes a terrorist hotbed, and it becomes a nightmare for the Jewish people, and war ensues. So I don't know what
Right, but my question here is, do you think it's ethnic cleansing to forcibly tell them to get out of Gaza?
Again, I'm not even saying I support it.
Because this is what Trump said.
I know what Trump said. I'm not even saying that I think that's a good idea. I do want someone to tell me what the solution is, though. Because that's an idea.
Yes.
Number one, for the people in Gaza, Egypt has to step up. But they don't want them because they know that it's not exactly easy. Jordan has to step up. They don't want them either. So Arab partners don't want these people, and so they have to be forced to take them and assimilate them. And they're not going to. So it's not an easy solution.
So here it is. Charlie thinks the solution is forcing the removal of the indigenous population of Palestine from their homes. In the first clip, he can't say it's immoral or that ethnically cleansing is immoral. I think if he acknowledges that ethnic cleansing is immoral, then he would have to acknowledge that Israel was founded upon ethnic cleansing. Israel was founded upon an immoral, illegal act. And in the second clip, he says Egypt and Jordan need to be forced to take in the Palestinians. How do you force people who are indigenous to the land, indigenous to Palestine? How do you get another country to force them to take them? And by the way, the Palestinians have DNA ancestry that can be traced back to the Canaanites even before the Jews came to this particular land. So how do you force them to be taken by another country? You have to force them out. You have to force them out. This is a type of solution this so-called pious intellectual Christian holds to. Ethnic cleansing.
I don't know. One time you've said that the Jews have never been ruled peacefully under the Arab rule.
Well, I asked for an example of that.
Yes,
yeah.
There are a couple.
Okay, I think the Jews in this audience wouldn't trust Muslims to govern them.
I'm saying in the Ottoman Empire.
You trust Muslims to govern you?
I'm saying in the Ottoman Empire. Al-Andalus Empire from
the... I would not point to the Ottoman Empire as being a beacon of peace.
Please. I'm saying that Al-Andalus from the 8th to the 12th centuries, they say 4 centuries. They say 4 centuries in peace. It was actually called the Golden Age of the Jews. Did you know that, Charlie?
Well, actually, the Jews were in exile during that time, weren't they? Weren't they in Babylonia, and that's when the Babylonian Talmud was written?
When Al-Andalus took control, they basically welcomed the Jews for 4 centuries. You can look it up.
Yeah, but they were not in Israel, were they?
Not in Israel, but
so
you're asking me...
How could it be the golden age of the Jews if they weren't in Israel?
That's what they called it. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, that's what the Muslims called it.
No. Listen. Because what you said is basically that they never lived in peace under the Arab rule.
I asked a question. I said, can you point to an example?
I just pointed it out to you right now.
I find it to be completely lackluster. It's just not true. But
was there no peace to the Jews in Al-Andalus Empire? Is what you're trying to say?
No, again, I don't want to go back into like 8th century history.
That's
with
what
our
you
time.
asked. You asked a broad question.
I didn't ask you. That was a video like a couple weeks ago.
But
I would not say the Ottoman Empire was an example of peace.
Oh my days, this one's this one's crazy. Charlie Kirk is asked the question about when did Jews feel safe and prosper under Islamic rule. You know, it just sounds like he's just completely ignorant of history. The person who answers the question, he talks about the Islamic golden age between the 8th and the 12th century. He's so ignorant that he thinks that was during the Babylonian exile. I want you to think about this. This person is talking about Muslim rule between the 8th and the 12th century, which some people have talked about the Jewish golden era. Yeah, the Jewish golden era that was between this 8th and 12th century when they lived in Andalusia, as an example. That this was their golden era. And he's saying, what? That was the Babylonian exile. Do you see the level of the ignorance this man has? You know, what's really shocking is that this is actually on his channel. When he was alive, he actually put this on his channel thinking that he smoked this guy, he baked this guy, he cooked this guy. And he's got comments saying, cheering him on. And if this guy is seen as some great knowledgeable debater and intellectual by his followers, then what does that say about his followers? What does it say about their IQ? The Babylonian exile of the Jews was started around about the 6th century BCE, before Christian era. We're not talking about the 8th century after Common Era. That's almost 1,000 years earlier. And I honestly believe I actually think in this situation he's just completely ignorant, just doesn't know. I honestly think he is. And I think he's just willfully ignorant. But because his followers are even more ignorant and stupid than he is, he can get away with this complete nonsense. In fact, the greatest Jewish scholar and rabbi was Maimonides, who lived where? Muslim Spain, who then became the physician of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, rahimahullah. Salahuddin, in fact, after he reconquered or reopened and liberated Jerusalem, encouraged Jews to come back to Jerusalem after they faced oppression and were suffering under the Crusaders, under the Christians. It was Muslims that allowed them back in again. And while he disparages the Ottomans, here's what a contemporary chief rabbi wrote in around about the 14th century when he sent a letter to his Jewish brethren in Europe. So Rabbi Isaac Safati, He wrote a letter, and this is what he said. Here I found rest and happiness. Turkey can also become for you the land of peace. Here the Jew is not compelled to wear a yellow hat as a badge of shame, as in the case of Germany, or in Germany, where even great wealth and fortune are a curse for a Jew because he therewith arouses jealousy among Christians. Arise, my brethren, gird up your loins, collect your forces, and come to us. Here you'll be free of your enemies. Here you'll find rest. Where's he talking about? He's talking about under Ottoman rule, Ottomani rule. Remember the guy, he just simply disparaged it. And this is the problem when you have people who are debating him, college students who don't know history, who can't really respond. And it's difficult. I can understand that. I'd find it difficult, standing and speaking in that type of environment to come up with these points. But this is how he responds. He just responds with disparaging remarks. And, you suddenly, the person who's questioning suddenly thinks, well, yeah, okay, then just accepts it. No, don't accept it. Question it. Have your facts ready. Because if you do, you will find that there are not just one statement, many statements, contemporary, and many historians who wrote about what Jewish life was like under Muslim rule. The thing that actually upset this balance was when European Zionist colonizers who weaponized Judaism, even though most of the founders of this movement, the Zionist movement, were actually mainly atheists, that when they came into Muslim world, into the Muslim lands, into Palestine, as part of a colonial settler project, that's actually when we found the problems really happening. That's why we've seen a century of problems within this region. It's not because of Jews living under Muslim rule. But yeah, I'm sure that if you look at 1300 years of Islamic history under the Khilafah, you may find periods of oppression that has taken place even against Jews. We've had periods of oppression that took place against Sunni Muslims during the period of time when the Mu'tazila took over for a short period of time. But as a general rule, Jews thrived under Islam. When comparing to Europe at the time, it was like a night and day comparison. So even today, there are Jews and Jewish rabbis who talk about we should return back to that time, live under an Islamic rule and Khilafah again.
I'm not a Muslim, but I wish that the Caliphate would come back, and I'll tell you why. The Caliphate have a way to protect the poor people. The jizya that we used to pay, it's only for the rich Jews. Poor Jews that didn't have money used to receive tax credit from the Muslims. Caliphate was the justice among the Caliphate was amazing.
Look, I could go on and deconstruct more of his points, refute them, but I hope that's sufficient to really expose his hollow arguments, which are just repetition of Zionist propaganda. And most of these arguments, most of these clips I've come across are clips he posted himself. He thinks they're good arguments. This is not me taking out, his worst performances. This is him thinking that these are his best arguments, best performances. And just maybe one final clip to show how callous this man was about Palestinians and Muslim deaths. Here you go.
So, it's funny. I used to say that, hey, if you as a gay person would go to Gaza, they'd throw you off of tall buildings, right? Now they don't have any tall buildings left, so I don't...
When you mess with the bull, you get the horns.
Is that too soon? I'm sorry. Maybe you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims.
Do I need to say more? Laughing and celebrating the destruction of an entire people. Yes, in my previous video, I mentioned he began questioning some of Israel's views and may have changed some of them in the last few months or so. The point is this, that Charlie Kirk never became pro-Palestine at the end of his life. That wasn't the issue. That wasn't the fear for Israel. But what Israel expects from those people they fund is slavish, blind support. Why? Why can't they accept even a small little criticism against the Zionist project? It's because they know as soon as you start believing that actually some of their propaganda points are false, some of the things that they may say on one or two issues might be lies. As soon as you start thinking like that, questioning like that, then your eyes start to open to the rest of the lies and propaganda. For Israel, they see this as a slippery slope of being exposed fully for what they are. And that's what they feared about Kirk. And even if they didn't necessarily fear about Charlie Kirk itself, they feared that the path or the points that he mentioned might be a path for his followers to change, might be a path for his followers to, start opening up their eyes and realize what the truth of what Israel represents. A settler colonial entity that was founded in ethnic cleansing is committing a genocide while manipulating governments in the West for their blind support for their project. And as soon as that happens, as soon as Israel and the people on the right start to, not just the right, but the right and the left, start to lose Israel's support, start to lose their support for Israel, as soon as that happens, it's game over. Why? Because Israel only exists because fundamentally of the Western and more importantly, American support. If they lose that, it's game over. They can't exist. The project ends. That's why they're so desperate that even an iota, even a sniffing of a slight criticism of Israel and the Zionist project is shut down, or they attempt to silence it before they go fully like Candace Owens or whatever. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please like, share, subscribe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.